This is assignment 1 for data manipulation techniques. And what we're looking at right now is the data that I'm going to be using for this assignment. This was taken from Open Data Hamilton, and we're going to be looking at healthcare in Hamilton by ward, specifically emergency department visits, frequent emergency department users, hospitalizations, and then I also have a few other demographic variables, notably income, and also we have here, this one is population and rate of private dwellings, or count of private dwellings in the ward, and then the ward area. So first thing we wanted to do was create our pivot chart. So we have a pivot chart here. I just took the hospitalizations and the ward numbers. And then here we can see when we plot it, what that looks like. So this is just a very quick glance. When we go into our other visualizations, we'll put more detail and you'll get a better idea. But I wanted the pivot table to be a good way to start so that when I moved on to other visualizations, I at least had an idea of what I was looking for. So what we can see here is emergency department visits were much higher than any of our other hospital data points. And there are definitely some wards which experience this at a much higher rate. Important to note is this is none of these are the raw number. They are per 1,000 people. All right. So now that we've taken a look at our pivot chart, we're going to head over to our next portion. Okay, here we're in our Jupyter notebook. I've named it Assignment 1. And let's just take a look at what we've done here. So the most important first step is to import all the libraries that we will need for our visualization. After I did that, I imported my CSV file, and I wanted to get a look at the contents. So I used the command head, and I just picked the first 3 rows. And I could see here, comparing to my original data, everything came in properly. So at least all the titles did. To confirm that all of the rows came in, I just printed the entire table because I had a small enough data set to do so, and that worked successfully. After that, I did some editing within Jupyter Notebooks. So I wanted to change this column from saying ward every single time to just the number, and I wanted to change the title from area to ward to make that a little bit more clear, especially with this variable here. It otherwise might be easy to confuse those two, so I wanted to clarify. I replaced all of those. This first line here is replacing the title, and the second through fourth lines are replacing the contents of that column. And then I once again printed the full table to take a look, and the change occurred successfully. After that, I was going to create a visualization. So I used matplotlib. In order to use that, you have to use this line here, which is % matplotlib inline. After that, I created just the basic figure, just telling Python how large I wanted it to be. And then I went in and started adding my details. So I added a title, I added a label for the x-axis and a label for the y-axis. And then I told Python which data to actually use and what type of plot to create. So I wanted it to be a scatter plot. And my x variable is going to be income. My y variable is going to be frequent emergency department users. And I changed the color to purple. So let's take a look at what this tells us now. As we can see, it appears that there is a very strong correlation between average household income and the rate of emergency department users. This specifies here, and it's important to remember that this is not based on, this isn't just reflecting the size of the population of each ward, because the rate of frequent emergency department users is per 1,000. It is not just a raw count. So this is really indicating that there is a close correlation, possibly a causative relationship there, but of course that is not something that we can know without further evaluation, and that's not something that we'll get into in this assignment. But just thinking ahead, if this were a project that I were spending more time on, that is definitely something that I would want to consider and look into if it were within the scope of the presentation. So now we have another idea of what type of relationship we're looking at. This visualization is now making me curious if a similar relationship holds true for our other healthcare variables, such as hospitalizations and emergency department visits. So we're going to take a look at those in our other platforms. So the next step that we're going to use for this project is we're going to use Power BI. And I've created a dashboard here so that we can get a better look at our data. As you can see, I have a scatter plot, a tree map, and 3 of these donut charts. And they're all linked together. They all use Ward. So because of that, if I wanted to take a closer look at Ward here, I could click one, and it would highlight that Ward on every other table. So that's just a helpful way to do that. So let's take a look at each of these charts a little bit more closely. The first one is our scatter plot, and this is looking at, again, hospitalizations and average household income. Sorry, not again. It's similar to the last scatter plot that we looked at, but it's a different variable. So last time we looked at frequent emergency department users and income. This time it's hospitalizations. And you can see, again, it's a very similar pattern. This looks, once again, like there is a close relationship. As you can see, we have inserted a trend line. That's fairly easy to do in Power BI. You just open up your chart, and usually you're going to start here in the details page, so you can just move over to analytics. And then I inserted a trend line, but there are other lines that you can use. What's available in this tab will change depending on what type of chart that you have. And sometimes, depending on the type of chart, there will be nothing available in here. So we can see that Ward 1 and Ward 4 seem to have, let's actually just double check that. No, that's not Ward 1. We can see that this is Ward 12, and Ward 12 has the highest average household income. It also has very low rates of hospital use, whether that's hospitalization or emergency department visits or frequent emergency department users. Frequent emergency department users, those are people who will be visiting the ER very often, more so than the average population. Sometimes, actually, interestingly, that's used kind of as a replacement for having a family doctor. So some people who don't have a family doctor, they'll end up making the hospital their first point of contact. So that's not something that we're going to be discussing anymore in this project, but just an interesting point that is known from the literature. So we've looked at some of the wealthier wards. We can also take a look at some of the poorer wards, and this is where this tree map really becomes useful. I kind of put it in here as an easy way for users to interact and see wards based on income. Because it's so clear just based on the size, of course you have to understand what a tree map represents. So this is expecting that users have some familiarity with a tree map. You can easily see here which wards have higher average household incomes based on the size of the box. So the poorest ward is going to be Ward 2 at an average household income of just over $51,000. And we can take a look here and see it does follow the same pattern that we have been seeing before. It has a very high hospitalization rate, which is shown both in the scatter plot and also in our donut graph. So our hospitalizations, that's 106 per 1,000 people. And we have similarly high numbers for emergency department visits. That one's almost 700, and frequent emergency department users. We've got almost 34 people there. Ward 3 also quite lower average income, 54,000. And again, higher rates of hospitalization, emergency department visits, and frequent emergency department users. If we look to some that are sort of middle of the road, like we've got Ward 7, Ward 1, 11. Oh, actually 11's interesting. That has quite low rates. That's a bit lower than let's take a look at our trend line actually. So we want to keep an eye on this one. And yeah, it is actually quite low, so that's interesting. If we had more time on this project, I would maybe want to look into what caused this. I would also want to do an analysis to find out if this is an outlier or if it's just one of the ones that's furthest away from the trend line, but not significantly so. So yeah, this dashboard is very helpful. It's really useful for getting an idea of the relationship between income, average income for each ward, as well as hospital use. And this type of information is helpful for city workers, both in the healthcare field and just public servants who are looking for patterns within the city, whether that's city councilors, mayor, or staff. It's useful for them to know what these patterns are so that they can better plan. As we were mentioning before, sometimes high rates of emergency department visits can be due to the fact that people don't have a family doctor for whatever reason. So there actually has been recently a push to kind of a campaign to get people to find a family doctor. So this is something that could help people working in the healthcare field know which wards maybe they need to target for some remedial and preventative effects. Lastly, but not leastly, we have our Tableau, and this is another tool that's very similar to Power BI actually. So we've imported our data source. This is the same one that we've been using all along. It has the same variables. And what's different about Tableau from Power BI? Well, there are several differences, but one big one is to make a dashboard, you're going to want to start off by making every chart individually. So what I started doing was I created a bubble plot of the area of the wards. So what this is showing, the size of the bubble is reflecting the area in square kilometers. And the text that's shown is the ward number. So I actually created two more bubble plots. I did one for the ward population and one for the average income by ward. And then I put them all into this dashboard. So this is what I would share with users if I were to do that. And that's because now you can compare these side by side. So you can look and see, okay, like we were talking about before, Ward 14 has a very large area. But if we look at the population, it has a very small population. So that's going to indicate to us that it is a rural area. In terms of income, sort of middle of the board. And then we can also look at other wards as well. So we can see Ward 2, very small, but it's one of the larger ones, not the largest, but that's indicating that it has a high population density. And it also has one of the lowest incomes, so showing that our downtown areas need more support. And that is assignment 1, using Power BI, Tableau, Jupyter, and Excel. Thank you.